Welcome to the Transform My Dance Studio podcast, the only podcast for dance studio owners, where each week we bring you business growth strategies to help you increase your profits, impact the lives of more students, while ensuring you get back some time to have a little life outside of the studio. It's time for you to become the go-to studio in your area. Now, here's your host, founder of the Dance Studio Owners Association, Clint Salter.
Hey there, dance studio owners. Welcome to the Transform My Dance Studio podcast. It's Clint here, and I'm so thrilled that you're joining us for today's episode. I've been looking so forward to speaking with today's guest, who is here to talk about something that a lot of studio owners experience in their business as well as their personal lives. And yes, it is stress. Our guest today is Dr. Linda Wilson, and she's a corporate wellness consultant who runs a multi-modality wellness practice in Melbourne, Australia. Linda is the author of Stress Made Easy, Peeling Women Off the Ceiling. I love this book, and hosts a weekly radio show focusing on stress management, health, and well-being. Linda, thank you for joining us. I'm excited to talk about stress. How are you?
Great. Thank you, Clint. And I'm excited to talk about stress as well. It's kind of my passion, which is a bit weird, really, but I guess you'll find out why.
So we hear stress a lot. When we talk to our friends or we talk to our studio owners, and they might say, in our association, I'm just so stressed today. I'm stressed today. Someone's making me feel stressed. My husband's stressing me out. What does stress actually mean?
So stress are thoughts and emotions that are felt in the body. And we do this by adding meaning to any situation. So you mentioned some really classic ones. My husband is annoying me today. The cat looked at me sideways. One of my staff or one of my students is having a really rough time, and I'm feeling that emotion for them. And this actually activates a part in our brain that then sends messages to our body, and we create like a negative feedback loop. Our body tells our brain that there's a problem. Our brain tells our body there's a problem, and it just sort of escalates from there. And then, of course, there's always going to be something else that adds to that. So it just goes from I guess, a manageable level of stress to something that's a little bit harder to work with.
And so when we're at that manageable kind of level of stress, so we probably go, oh, hey, I'm feeling a little different. I'm feeling a little off. I'm feeling a little anxious. What can we do in those kind of initial moments of feeling stress so that it doesn't turn into that kind of big snowball?
Yeah, I think the word that you used there a number of times, Clint, was feeling. And our feelings are actually something that we can use as an intervention. So what I mean by that is when you become aware that there is actually something going on, and we experience this in lots of different ways. We all do stress slightly differently. So you might experience it as a tightness in the chest. You might experience it as a mild headache. You might experience it as, sensations in your gut, for example. So we all do it in slightly different ways. But the key is recognizing that the process has started. And once you recognize that the process has started, then you can intervene. And again, that's really different for every single person. So, for example, some people need to do a quick walk around the block. Some people need to do some deep breathing. Breathing is absolutely vital when we're calming down our nervous system, when we're telling our brain that everything's okay, because when we're stressed, we tend to shallow breathe. And I know as dancers, that's a really important way for you to calm down nerves, for example. And nerves is a really good example of what stress can feel like as well.
I love it. So we've got some examples there, breathing. I'm the one that walks around the block. I got to go for a walk. I've got to get out, hopefully in the sunshine. What other things can we do to help us if we kind of don't catch it in the earlier stages where we can kind of manage it, take a walk, deep breathe, kind of move on with our day. What if we have that, that feeling of like that lingering stress? Maybe it's a teacher that continually is like coming in late, and it's like that last time where they're coming late, we're stressed because we're frustrated. I think stress can kind of like go into a whole bunch of different emotions. I mean, how do we kind of combat, but ideally prevent things from getting to that point?
Yeah, absolutely. So the key is, first of all, awareness around what's happening for you. So we all know that there are key situations in our life where our stress levels can just go through the roof. So if we use your example, Clint, of that teacher who constantly turns up late or is doing the wrong thing or is not following the protocol for the class or whatever it may be, if we know those situations exist in our life, then we need to actually create a plan for ourselves. So I know systems and procedures are very, very important within business framework, and I know that you do provide those sorts of things to your owners, but we often fail or forget to actually create procedures and systems for ourselves. So if we can identify these are the key areas in my life where I do struggle, where my stress levels are likely to go through the roof, we need to come up with a plan. And there's so many things that we can do as a way of supporting ourselves. So the first one is identifying what those are. Then we need to work out a management plan, and we need to work out how we can change our feelings around those particular situations. So if we deal with ourselves first, then moving into that situation and dealing with other people or other circumstances or whatever it may be, then we're far more likely to succeed. So having a plan of action is really, really important.
And what are some of the, if we've identified, okay, in these scenarios when I'm with, because we've all got those friends or people in our life where we can tend to sometimes maybe be a bit more stressed in situations with them. If we bring awareness to that, what, a management plan, like what does that look like? Is it daily practices like, meditation, like exercise, like what we fuel our body with?
Absolutely.
What does that look like?
Yeah. So, for example, you need to come back to the basics. And I know that often people think, it's sort of, fundamentals that we need to come back to take care of ourselves from the ground up. So that includes, really developing our sleep habits. It really includes things like making sure we eat well, basically all of the things that you mentioned, Clint, but also finding the thing that actually debriefs you. It may be a person, so you may look to get some more coaching or some more mentoring for yourself. It may be to actually see someone to understand what your stress actually is about, because, the thing is not always the thing. Sometimes that person can walk into our life and trigger our stress response. It's not actually about them. It's about the 10 things that happened that morning prior to them, and they were just the bit that sort of tipped you over the edge. So knowing ourselves is very, very important in terms of working with our own stress levels. But I highly encourage people to experiment with things. Meditation is amazing, but sometimes it takes a lot of work to be able to kind of flip into that state. Exercise we've already mentioned. I use a couple of tools that are a little bit out there, I guess, because I'm a bit of a neuro geek, but also a woo-woo girl. So I use a technique called tapping, which I highly recommend your audience to just do a bit of a search on, and they're going to find a lot of information about that tool. But knowing yourself and caring for yourself from the ground up has to be a fundamental part of any stress plan.
I love that. I think it's helpful. Now, I want to talk about, sometimes when we get stressed, we go to things that don't help us. So people, I know we joke quite a bit actually in the association or with our studio owners. They're like, oh, this happened today and I'm feeling stressed. So, I'm going to have a couple of glasses of wine, or I'm going to indulge in a square of chocolate that turns out to be like the whole block of chocolate.
Yeah.
What do we do in those situations when our go-tos aren't necessarily the helpful things, and are things that, in the long run are harming us and really kind of a Band-Aid in the moment fix, but not a long-term kind of fix or solution to the stress?
Yeah, that is such a great question. And I think we all do it, right? The chocolate cake suddenly looks 10 times tastier because we're stressed. Or that handbag that we've, kind of said no to 10 times. Suddenly we absolutely deserve it and go out and buy it, even when we know that's not really something we should be doing. So the important thing first would be to really identify those behaviors. So often we do have the common behaviors, right? You mentioned the glass of wine or the chocolate. We often have those same bad sort of habits. If you can call them bad, I don't know, they're coping mechanisms. So I don't like to necessarily label them as negative things. They may have a negative consequence, and that's what we need to be aware of. So identify the behaviors, create a commitment to yourself, but then also create a team. So that's a support team I'm talking about. It could be a partner, it could be a girlfriend, it could be one of your teachers or one of your staff. Let them know what you're experiencing. And, bring the support team in with you, and then also have a worst case scenario plan. So if the chocolate's there, you're going to go for it. Okay, give yourself permission perhaps to have some, but then go and do an extra walk around the block or do an extra class. One of the things that people get into, Clint, is this real judgment around themselves if they've made commitments and then they've failed. And what I like to encourage people to do is just do a reset. Have a plan, follow the plan if you can, but in the beginning, sometimes that's really hard to do. Everything takes practice until it becomes an automatic for us. So have a plan. If you fall down, just do a reset.
It's great. I think, you talked about kind of the judgment we put on ourselves. I think there's an absolute, and I know you talk and have written about, the inner monologue that we have with ourselves. And I think a lot of the time, stress can be self-induced, and that the deeper level of stress that we get into is all of the self-talk that we have inside of our brain. So what do we do in those moments where we just we feel like we're kind of spiraling down and there is that judgment, and, we start making, bigger deals around things and what they actually are. And before we know it, we've created like this whole scenario up. How can we prevent it, slow it down, interrupt that pattern, so that we can get out of it and not continue that spiral?
Yeah. And those doubts and those judgments, when we're in a really happy, positive place, they just simply don't exist. But as soon as we start falling into a situation where we feel vulnerable or slightly out of control, or things aren't going the way that we want them to, that evil voice, it's a shocker. And I think that women are especially prone to this around particularly self-judgment, I think it is. So I'm not good enough, I can't do it, who do I think I am to be thinking I can run a really awesome, successful studio? And the first thing there is to recognize your own thinking. So recognize that, I do this when I'm feeling vulnerable, or when I'm feeling out of control, or when things aren't going the way that I would really hope that they do. I often say to my clients, make a list of what those things are, because they're often classic statements like, who do I think I am to be doing this? Or I'm never going to be good at this, or it's never going to be any different because of who I am. So be aware of what those things are. So you identify them. Then you need to take responsibility. And the way that you do that is really analysing, well, what is it that you are saying to yourself? Because maybe you do need some more skills in a particular area. If you're judging yourself, do a little bit of sort of rational emotive therapy and ask yourself, well, do I actually need to upskill in this area so I do have the confidence? Maybe you need to delegate to somebody else some of those things that you're judging yourself for. And then, of course, finding tools that really take you out of your head because this is where it's all happening. This is where we're generating our stress from. And we mentioned a couple of those before. I talked about tapping, meditation's another one, exercise is another one. But I have a favorite saying that I use, and I've used it for many, many years now. And that's when I catch myself with that judgmental voice, because, you know, it still happens to me, even with all of the tools that I have. Sometimes I catch myself. And so I hear the thought, I catch the thought, and then I say, thank you for coming, you can leave now. And it's just a way of acknowledging the fact that we are having the thinking, or we are having the thoughts and the feelings, and then giving them a very clear and specific reason to leave. And that's by asking them to leave. So it sounds a little bit like, could that really work? But you're pattern interrupting, and that's a big part of what we do. So, you know, you catch yourself and then you interrupt that, so that the connections that you're making in the brain between that judgmental thinking and then the feeling that comes from it are actually interrupted. The more you interrupt them, the less power they actually have.
So good. I love that. I love that technique right there. Linda, is there like a normal level of stress? You know, like, is there like, yeah, I'm feeling stressed, and, you know, this is kind of part of life. Like, is all stress negative?
No, it absolutely is not. There is a form of stress that's called eustress. And if you think about it, like, we need to have a certain level of stress to wake up in the morning, right? We need a certain level of, I guess you could call it stress. You could just call it activation, or motivation is the other way you could think about it, to get out of bed and get ready to get on with the day. So not all stress is bad. And often what we do is we use that word, but we think about that word in a really negative way. For example, falling in love creates a form of stress, but we wouldn't actually say it's negative. Pushing our bodies to a new level, we could say that that's stress, or we could say that that's actually just increasing our abilities or increasing our performance. So not all stress is bad. The only time that it becomes bad is when it starts to have a negative impact on how we're thinking and how we're feeling in our life. So, you know, stress can only be labelled negatively if you recognise that it's having a detrimental effect on you. And the other thing that I often say, and it's pretty controversial, is that stress is actually a lazy response. Because choosing to be positive, choosing to be active and take responsibility for our stress is a really it's a choice that we have to make and then actively participate in, whereas stress can often just sort of happen to us. So think about, okay, where can I be proactive when I know that stress is a part of this particular situation or that scenario, or is associated with that particular person?
So good. I love it. That's I think that's a great piece of information right there for our studio owners. A lot of our studio owners, they might have young children of their own. They're definitely dealing with children and teens inside of their studio. How can we weave this into, you know, our classes, our lessons as, you know, dance teachers, you know, to build, you know, more resilient, you know, human beings?
Oh, I just love that question. Thank you for asking that question. I think that for teachers, for studio owners, for the entire, you know, staff and crew at any of the studios, never ever underestimate the power of your influence as a mentor or a role model for those young people or children in your class. What I often say to people within their business, and this applies to across the board with any business, is if you understand your philosophy, you can weave lessons through whatever business you have. So, for example, just as one thing that an owner might do, have a thought for the day or have an emotion for the day. And during the class or after the class or whenever it's appropriate, just introduce that as a concept to the kids or the young people that are involved in the class. And, you know, maybe a 30-second discussion around a quote, or a comment about resilience, or just being available to them. Because, you know, as much as we don't want to think about it, some of these young adults are experiencing things in their life that really some of us can't even imagine. So you standing up the front and being a magnificently available adult for them to use as a resource is one of the most powerful positions any person could be in. So use it as a way to express that life can be good, that you can, create relationships and trust with mentors, and that there is something that they can learn about life from actually doing their dancing.
So good. I love it. And I think that's a great note for us to wrap up, Linda. I want to thank you for sharing so much of your wisdom and knowledge. I hope for all of our studio owners, I actually know for everyone that's listening at the moment, your probably shoulders are more relaxed. You're probably feeling a little bit calmer as well. And I hope that this gives you the tools to be able to go in the day and manage your stress. And really, what Linda's talking about is being the best version of yourself as possible. So, Linda, thank you so much. Where can our studio owners go to find out more about you and also to grab a copy of your book?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can go to drlindawilson.com. That's drlindawilson.com. You can order my book from my website, but it's also available on Amazon and some of those other really big online bookstores. And you can check me out on LinkedIn and, find me on Facebook. Awesome. Well,
Linda, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you coming on and sharing today. And guys, go out there and tackle the day and have an amazing week. Thanks, Linda.
My pleasure, Clint.
Thank you for joining us today. For all the resource links from the show and to receive access to our free dance studio growth training, make sure you visit transformmydancestudio.com.